The helicopter skimmed low over the slate-colored sea, rotors chopping a rhythm that rattled Eliza Okafor's teeth. Through the windshield she saw the island looming, an abrupt hulk of granite, forest, and cloud, ringed by white breakers that hurled themselves against the cliffs. A gull smacked the windshield, slid off, and vanished below. Eliza flinched. The pilot only grinned, as though such omens were part of the itinerary. They banked left, following a narrow fjord that cut deep into the island's heart. On the far shore, half concealed by spruce and bitter alder, crouched a compound of stone buildings. Their windows glinted like watchful eyes. Stormhaven Sanitarium, the letter had called it. A remote psychiatric facility whose isolation was both its curse and its selling point. The pilot set the helicopter down on a lichen-spattered helipad, blade still whirring, then motioned for her to jump. Eliza ducked and ran, case in hand, hair whipping in the downdraft. When the helicopter lifted off again, sound disappeared with it. She was left in a silence so deep it ached. Dr. Niels Kessler awaited her by the gate. Tall, spare, impeccably buttoned in a charcoal coat, despite the brine-laden wind. He shook her hand with clinical briskness. "Your equipment's here," he said. "I trust the transportation board treated it gently?" "Nothing looks broken," Eliza answered, though she wouldn't know until she recalibrated every sensor. "Your letter said the weather stations you installed keep failing." Kessler's expression did not change, but his gray eyes flicked to the clouds piling behind the ridge. "They fail because this island refuses ordinary behavior. And, not coincidentally, because of the man we keep on the third floor." Eliza raised a brow. The Meteorological Institute had chartered her because she was a microclimate specialist, not a psychiatrist. She was here for wind speed anomalies and barometric convulsions that made aviation forecasts for the North Atlantic a nightmare. Yet Kessler's letter had hinted at something stranger, a hypothesis that linked torn sky to tormented mind. She'd laughed at first. Now, facing the asylum's leaden bulk and the bruised sky above it, she found her amusement thinning. Inside, quarters smelled of disinfectant and old stone. Overhead lights flickered between tungsten and malfunctioning neon. They passed locked wards, whispering patients, orderlies in muted scrubs. Finally, Kessler led her into a small office lined with seismographs, anemometers, and computer monitors that displayed real-time weather data from the island's 5 official stations. Half the feeds blinked red. "Offline," Kessler tapped a graph. "You see these pressure drops?" Eliza nodded. "They'd be rough even in monsoon country. You recorded them in January?" 4 times. Each within 20 minutes of patient E experiencing a manic break. "You're saying his moods cause these spikes?" "I'm saying the correlation is exact." Kessler folded his hands. "We need someone who speaks the language of clouds, Dr. Okafor. Because if this correlation is causal, pharmacology alone may no longer suffice." Eliza shrugged out of her windbreaker. "Show me the data from the beginning." For the next 3 hours she pored over logs. Kessler had been thorough. 9 months of blood pressure charts, sleep cycles, serotonin assays, and psychiatric notes plotted alongside wind direction, humidity, temperature swings, even lightning strike counts. The alignment was uncanny. 11 episodes of major depression coincided with long, suffocating fog banks that wrapped the island like damp cotton. 7 manic surges lined up with squalls so violent trees splintered. When the patient's mood stabilized after electroconvulsive therapy, conditions eased to mild drizzle and 8-knot winds. There was no lag between nerve and nature. The graphs rose and dropped like dancers in lockstep. "Could be confirmation bias," Eliza murmured. "Of course," Kessler said. "That's why you're here." She spent the next day hiking to each weather station, one on the cliff, one buried in a bog, one perched above a cave that boomed with trapped air. She replaced batteries, swapped cracked anemometer cups, reset loggers. Everywhere she walked, a peculiar hush followed her, as though the spruce listened. The sky remained mottled. Sunlight sliced through ragged holes, then closed, plunging the island back into dimness. On the ridge she thought she felt the ground hum. Seismic resonance or adrenaline. That night she sat in the staff refectory over watery stew, while orderlies whispered. The rumor was that Patiente, the institution avoided names, never slept longer than an hour. That he spoke to empty corners, and the empty corners replied. That during his worst agitation the roof groaned as if pressed by invisible hands. She took her bowl to her, not because she believed them, but because the hush in their voices bled beneath her skin. At 3:12 a.m. she woke to thunder. Sheets of purple light strobed through her blinds. The building trembled. She pulled on boots and a parka, grabbed her tablet and ran outside. Wind howled like an instrument badly played. Yet on her screen the barometric pressure wasn't merely dropping, it was plummeting. An elevator cable cut. She checked timestamps. The descent had started at 3:07, precisely when the nurse log recorded Patient E beginning to scream. By breakfast the storm was gone, leaving fallen boughs and a sky scrubbed raw. Eliza found Kessler in the observation booth overlooking the isolation wing. Through one-way glass they watched him, a gaunt man, mid-30s, shackled by wrists and ankles to a steel bed. His hair hung in damp ropes, eyes swollen but alert. Around him the air shimmered with leftover static. He never had these effects before he arrived, she whispered. He arrived because he was already dangerous, Kessler replied. But the amplifications here, yes, they are new. Eliza swallowed. I need to speak with him. Impossible. Conversation agitates him. Agitated or not, I need controls. Talk, watch the sky. Don't talk, watch the sky. I don't even know what to say, otherwise this is ghost hunting. Kessler hesitated, then nodded. 10 minutes, one witness, no physical contact. They led her into the cell wearing no medal. Patient E, his chart name was Silas Gray, turned his head as she approached. His eyes were startlingly clear blue, irises ringed by red veins. She introduced herself. He said nothing. I study weather, she explained, and it seems the weather listens to you. He smiled, gentle, heartbreakingly resigned. No, he said, voice ragged. It listens through me. Through you to what? He looked past her to the window's narrow slit. Outside, clouds massed like cavalry. To everything. She drew a breath. Silas, may I ask how you feel right now? Tired. His eyes flicked to her tablet. I like when it's quiet, but you people make me talk and then it gets loud. Eliza tapped a key. The station on the bog reported rising gusts. She glanced at the clock. If we sat together and said nothing, do you think the weather would stay calm? Maybe. He closed his eyes. But I dream even when I'm awake. The dreams push out. She asked if the dreams matched the sky or caused it. He laughed, a short, cracked sound. No cause, no match, only the same river, flowing two directions. Wind banged the shutter. 10 minutes were gone. Orderlies unlocked her and guided her out. On her tablet, the barometer ticked upward again. That afternoon, she hiked to the headland where electromagnetic sensors were planted. The sea glittered, gulls wheeled, complaining. Yet her data feed pulsed irregularly, like a heart skipping beats. She called the institute. They promised a satellite overpass in 2 days. Her superiors wanted raw numbers, not ghost stories. Stick to the instruments, they urged. Find us the microclimate trigger thermal vent. Topography, cold current, whatever. Everything's physical in the end. Yes, physical, Eliza thought, as she stared at the asylum roof below. All storms had physics, the exacting calculus of differential heating, condensation, wind shear. Perhaps Silas was merely a lightning rod, his episodes timed by coincidence. Or perhaps his nervous system carried a charge large enough to seed clouds. The human body is Van de Graaff generator. She'd read of piezoelectric crystals, inside cranial plate of solar winds coupling with alpha waves. Fringe science, but fringe sometimes thrust itself into the center and refused to leave. That night, she returned to the office and overlaid 9 months of mood shifts onto mesoscale radar. The correlation persisted even when she introduced lags, inversions, smoothing kernels, removed Silas's peaks, and the weather flattened like ironed linen. Put them back, and the island convulsed. She cursed softly. She'd wanted to disprove Kessler. Instead, the date insisted. Shortly after midnight, alarms shrieked. She raced for the isolation wing. A nurse shouted that Silas's restraints had failed. Sheets of rain whipped through broken skylights. Eliza climbed a stairwell, wind tearing at her coat, and found him on the rooftop. He stood barefoot on the slick slate tiles, arms outstretched. Lightning spidered overhead, yet none struck him. Instead, it forked to the sea, to the trees, to the iron fence. His face glowed pallid in each flash, eyes phosphorescent. Kessler and two guards edged closer, tranquilizer rifles trembling. "Silas!" Eliza shouted. He turned toward her, rain rivulets clinging to his cheeks like tears. "Too loud," he murmured, almost apologetic. "I keep trying to muffle it." "Then let us help." She took a step onto the roof. The wind hurled her sideways. She caught a vent pipe. "Come inside. We can make it quiet." Silas frowned. "Inside walls. It echoes." He closed his eyes. The wind dropped abruptly, so sudden she staggered forward. As she regained balance, she realized the air was not merely still. It was dead. Vacuum of motion. Gulls hung frozen, mid-slight, wings extended but unmoving, leaves hung like paper cutouts. Beyond the island, the Atlantic lay mirror-flit. Silas opened his eyes. "Is this quiet enough?" The silence pressed on Eliza's eardrums until they hurt. No hiss of surf, no insect buzz, no breath of spruce. Kessler lifted a hand to his own ears, grimacing. "This isn't natural," Eliza whispered. Silas glanced up. Above them, where clouds should churn, the sky was an unbroken lens, a gray transparency. Stenciled across it were faint ripples, like fingerprints on glass. "It's holding its breath," Silas said, "but even breath must return." Eliza edged closer, arms raised. "If you let them sedate you, you'll sleep. The dream might stop." "I don't sleep," he replied. Regret softened his voice. "I only hand the dream to others. That's what wind is, you know. One half of the dream, trading places with the other half." Behind him, Kessler gestured. The guards lifted rifles. Eliza shook her head violently. "Wait, Silas," she said. "I believe you. But people will die if the air stops moving. Birds, fish, the hospital generators that rely on cooling fans." His shoulders sagged. Always that balance. And the noise. And the breath. Suddenly a gull plummeted out of its stopped flight, smashing onto the roof tiles with a sickening thud. Its body twitched once and stilled. Eliza flinched. "Listen to me. You aren't alone in the dream. We're here. Let us carry part of it." He studied her. Lightning flickered, yet there was no thunder. "How?" "Start small," she said. "Give the breeze a heartbeat. In, out." She inhaled, exhaled. She felt absurd, but continued. "Match me." He mirrored her breaths. Around them, grass bent faintly. The tree line rippled. Waves licked the cove's mouth. Sound returned in shreds. First a hissing, then the low moan of water against stone. Kessler signaled the guards to lower rifle. His face shone with tentative hope. Silas shivered. "It always builds again." "Maybe not if you have an anchor," Eliza said. She pointed to the meteorological station on the ridge. "We'll wire you to sensors, biofeedback. When you rise too high, alarms ring. You meditate. We train pilots that way. Stall warnings, angle of attack." Silas blinked raindrops. "Biofeedback?" "Machines that reflect the body to the mind," she explained. "We'll test C's in biofeedback." "Machines that reflect the body to the mind," she explained. "The mind can steer," he considered. The wind freshened, now natural, carrying spruce resin and salt. "I'll try." He lifted his wrists, raw where restraints had chafed. "No more chains, only monitors." Kessler stepped forward. "We can arrange that. Under supervision." Silas nodded, weary. "As long as I'm not alone." Far below, the pressure sensors ticked upward to normal. The weather stations chirped back online. In the control room, staff cheered. But on the roof, Eliza, Silas, and Kessler stood among shattered skylight glass, dead gull, and the hush after cataclysm. Over the next week they built a laboratory in the unused chapel, EEG caps, pulse oximeters, galvanic skin sensors, and a bank of screens that translated Silas' physiological spikes into colored bars. Green for calm, amber for agitation, red for pre-storm. A second wall showed live weather telemetry. The visuals reminded Eliza of a duet, bars on one side, isobars on the other. Training began with breathing exercises. When Silas's heart rate climbed, amber lights pulsed. He practiced counting, imagery, grounding. Sometimes he succeeded. Other times the ceiling creaked and drizzle rattled the stained glass. Yet each session ended with both graphs descending, however slowly, toward equilibrium. Word spread. A research grant arrived, along with ethicists and insurance lawyers. Satellite data confirmed that Stormhaven's barometric gyrations had narrowed by half. Cargo ships reported steadier seas. Air traffic controllers praised improved forecast accuracy. Still, danger lurked. Once, during a nightmare, Silas triggered microbursts that uprooted two spruce and shattered the chapel window, but he woke, saw the red flood of warning LEDs, and forced himself down through hoarse chanting until the lights returned to green. One evening, Eliza found him alone, studying a map of atmospheric rivers. "Do you feel controlled?" she asked. He shook his head. "I feel translated. Like a language, the earth speaks through me, but now I can negotiate terms." She smiled. "That's progress." He met her gaze, earnest. "It only works because you believe both in data and in me. If either fails, I slip." She touched the graph paper in her hands, lines of ink that still astonished her. "I won't let either fail." Months passed. Spring softened the island's edges. Lupine blossomed in the gullies. Tour boats began circling the cliffs again, their guides oblivious to the man whose pulse helped keep seas gentle. The Institute published a cautious paper on bioclimatic feedback via human mediator, sparking ridicule and fascination in equal measure. Then came the afternoon Eliza received notice her contract would end, the island now stable enough to hand off to routine technicians. She went to the chapel to tell Silas. He stood before the monitors, expression unreadable. The weather graphs were stable green. His physiological display, however, flickered between amber and red. "I guessed," he said before she spoke. "I could feel you drifting." "It's not my choice," she said. "Funding protocols." "I'm not angry," his voice quavered. "Just unsettled. New variables." She stepped closer. "We'll transition slowly. Video sessions." The LEDs behind him snapped crimson. On the weather wall, a low-pressure vortex blossomed offshore. Silas closed his eyes, breath shallow. "Anchor," she whispered. "In 2, 3, out, 2, 3. He tried. Crimson deepened. The building groaned. Eliza slammed the intercom. "Initiate protocol. Echo full sedation." But she knew the sedatives would take minutes. Suddenly Silas grabbed her wrist. His hand was ice, yet his eyes burned. "You can't stay by contract," he said. "Stay by choice." Wind hammered the chapel doors. Eliza's tablet buzzed. Gale warnings, rogue wave advisories. She saw decisions like lightning. Remain, forfeiting tenure track. Leave, risking cyclones keyed to heartbreak. She looked at Silas, man, conduit, precarious treaty between sky and sea, and knew the Institute's models mattered less than this fragile alliance. She exhaled. "I'll renegotiate, even if I have to fund it myself." Almost imperceptibly, the crimson dimmed. Wind backed off. Silas's grip loosened. He sagged, tears mixing with sweat. "Thank you," he whispered. The storm cell on the weather wall unraveled, tendrils dissipating like smoke. Outside, sunshine speared through narrow storm gaps, plating the sea in hammered gold. Later, she stood on the pier, watching that light. The island no longer felt like a prison, more a border post between human heart and planetary breath. In her pocket hummed incoming messages, policy hurdles, budget debates, skeptical peer reviewer. They would fight, doubt, maybe call this magic. Let them. She had seen graphs trace the pulse of a man into the pulse of a world, and she would hold that knowledge like a compass. Behind her, Silas's voice drifted through the open chapel window, reciting the metronomic counts she'd taught him. Somewhere high above, cirrus clouds formed a slow spiral. Not a tempest, but the gentle eddy left behind when larger storms passed. Lisa closed her eyes, matched her breathing to his, and felt the sky exhale with them.